Hello, I'm Gwenydd Jones of the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation. In this video, I interview Daniela D'Amato, Operations Manager at Italian language services provider Creative Words. Dana talks about how her MA in translation led her to find her passion for project management. She shares details about the services of localization and content management, and offers some fantastic advice for freelance translators on how to make themselves more attractive to translation agencies. We also cover machine translation post-editing and specialization, and why it's a good idea to take some time to work on your LinkedIn profile. Translators, I give you Daniela D'Amato. Dana, your entry point into the language services world was your degree in translation and interpretation from the University of Genoa.
Yes.
Today, you're operations manager at Creative Words, which is an Italian language services company specializing in the Italian language. Can you give us a summary of your career path?
Absolutely, I would love to. Like you said, I started out with a BA at the University of Genoa in translation and interpretation. Then I moved for a year to the UK to attend an MA at the University of Surrey. And it was an MA in translation with a language technology pathway, which basically meant, it was like 12 years ago, I think, it meant having a CATL class within the degree. And during that class, we had a simulation of a real life scenario of translation agencies. We were divided into groups of people, and I was assigned the role of the project manager. I had never heard of the project manager role before. And I was supposed to be delivering a project in Greek, which I don't speak, so I couldn't help my translators in my team. I was super worried about, the outcome of all this. But then I realized that I loved it. I loved being a project manager rather than a linguist. And that's where I actually started looking for jobs. And I didn't even look for linguistics types of jobs. I just straight away looked for project management positions, which is what I became right after I graduated from the MA. So I worked in a translation agency in London, one in Milan, and then I moved back to Genova, which is my hometown, by the way, and I started being a full-time translation project manager here. And I did that in two different companies before becoming an operations manager at Creative Words, almost 5 years ago now.
I think it's really interesting that you did this role of project manager on your MA and you were like, yeah, this is it. This is for me. I'm not interested in the linguistic side. What about it? Why did you prefer it to actually doing the translation?
What I liked about it was that I was the one making the choice. I could say, okay, no, we don't do this following this process. We were supposed to create glossaries and translate a few web pages, use a certain CAT tool. I was the one suggesting the process, the workflow. And I felt like I want to be the one doing that. I think I know what I want to say, and I think I have some good ideas. So I want to be the one proposing the solutions, not the one just translating, which is absolutely fine. And it's not always just translating. We know that. But I found that I did translate for a while, and I found it, not exactly, to make the most of my time. I would rather speak to people more rather than working on my own on a translation project or revision projects, like spending hours just revising jobs done by somebody else. No, I wanted to do the job. I wanted to be active and change also very often from one task to another, which is what project managers usually do. They don't always focus on one project at a time. So I needed that sort of, sparkle and changing subjects and clients and talking to people, which I thought was not so much in line with the life of a translator, at least not everyday life of a translator.
You're not the first person I've spoken to who went into the MA and actually came out loving translation, loving languages, but saying, I don't actually want to work full-time as a translator. because of the way that you work, which it is. It's a very solitary job. It's an extremely detail-oriented job. And it, you when you're younger, you think, oh yeah, I want to be a translator, that's cool. But as you get to know yourself, it's like, well, actually, this job doesn't quite suit my personality and what makes me happy. So it's interesting to hear that insight. And so you were a project manager for a while, you worked your way up and you became the operations manager.
I did.
What exactly does that role involve?
Okay, what I usually like to say, because it's very difficult to explain to people what I actually do, is that I do everything, but I do nothing at the same time, which is a bit weird. I know it sounds weird. But it is true because it's, well, first of all, while project managers or linguists are roles that are similar from one company to another. Of course, there are different processes in place. But the role of the operations manager instead can differ from a company to the other. That's what I've learned by speaking to other operations managers now. Because when I started over as an operations manager, I didn't know exactly what my role was to be, you know? Mm-hmm. I had worked with my current boss, who was actually the operations manager in the company where I used to work as a project manager before. So we were already working together before. So I knew what he was doing, but it was completely different from what I'm doing now, for example, here at Creative Words. So I first had to learn that it was a job that was to be created from me and on the, vision and mission of this specific company. It's essentially a job that you need to learn to delegate a lot. So I had to move from being a project manager, hands-on, with short time deadlines, to becoming someone who did not have to do the job. I had to train somebody to do the job, and I had to delegate, and it was really painful at the beginning. Let me tell you, it really was. So basically what I do now is to empower as much as possible the different teams to do their jobs better by assigning goals or giving them advice or assigning training programs to them, while at the same time taking care of the different departments of the company, including accounting. I had to learn everything about accounting myself. I'm not an accountant, but I need to be able to understand what the accountants tell me about the company and about how we're going and the budget and what do we have to do about it. Or marketing. I didn't know anything about marketing. I had to learn what the metrics are, what we should be doing or not doing. And yeah, it's basically learning to delegate and learning to teach people to do their jobs better, even without knowing that job yourself.
It sounds like a really exciting role because, as you said, within the mission and the vision of the company, you can then put your stamp on the role and take your own approaches to it and also learn and grow further.
Yes, exactly.
To talk a little bit about Creative Words now, on your website, it describes itself as a localization and a content management company. Could you explain what those two services involve, please?
Well, localization, we know what that is. So essentially translation, localization into different locales and with the, cultural nuances as well. Content management is more like all those linguistic related tasks like content creation, copywriting, or for example, which is related to content creation. We do work for some, for example, e-commerce website. We do not translate the descriptions. We create them by looking at the images, for example, of certain products. And we have somebody create them directly into Italian in that case, or into other languages. So it's more communication on a broader level. It's not just localization or translation. It's broader in the sense that we offer also audio tasks or audio projects, so we can provide with that as well. It's more a 360-degree kind of offering revolving around languages and communication.
And so within the content management, is it key that there are two languages involved? So it's sort of bilingual copywriting in a way that the writer needs to understand the other language, but then they're going to be creative in some way. So it could be a transcreation, or it could be actually just writing something from scratch.
Yes, Yeah, sometimes it does involve knowing the two languages. Some other times, no, it's just knowing the target language and start writing into that language by following just guidelines into maybe English and maybe then writing into Italian. So
Okay.
it really depends on the kind of project.
Okay, so within content management, you could include
Yeah,
straight copywriting and sort of the set of marketing services, which some translators
precise.
diversify into.
Yes.
I would like to go back to localization because I know
Yeah.
that some of our viewers are complete beginner, they're linguists thinking of going into translation. So if we're thinking, translation is converting the source language text into the target language text, what other elements come into localization?
Well, it also all the cultural aspects, I would say, to simplify, the term localization. But if you, well, it works well if you know Italian or if you know the Italian culture. If I give you this example, but if you come to Italy with an English text talking about eating a bolognese sauce pasta in Rome, it wouldn't work when you translate that for an Italian audience, Italian tourists going to Rome, because in Rome you would never eat a bolognese sauce, which, by the way, we would never call bolognese sauce.
No,
You would no, no,
you're
no.
destroying these
I
stereotypical
know.
images I have.
I am destroying it all. I know. Apologies. Yeah, no, you would eat another type of pasta. You would eat carbonara, for example, cacio e pepe. So you would completely transfer that meaning into something different, just so that the local audience reading your target text can really feel like, okay, this person is speaking my language in a broader sense. So that's a very simplifying way of speaking about localization.
So I guess it might involve looking at images and things as
Also,
well.
yeah,
Hmm.
also, yeah, yeah, totally.
So if we're thinking from the linguist perspective, within what is the localization, the process for you from start to finish, where does the freelance linguist come into the process?
Well, not right from the start, but quite soon. We have a team of in-house translators and linguists. It's fairly small. There are 5 of them, but they're not translators themselves. I mean, of course, they are translators. They can translate, but their role is that of being a lead linguist.
Hmm.
So what we train them to become is sort of project managers on the linguistic side. So they kind of overview the overall quality at the end of the tasks, and they also have calls with the client directly or with the translation freelance team outside of Creative Words, and they train them on the way we want our processes to be. We do a lot of, for example, post editing. So our lead linguist would train the freelance team to post edit. So, of course, we need to rely on the freelancers to do the job firsthand because we don't do that ourselves in house. So they come really quite from the beginning. But there is always somebody in Creative Words sort of guiding, paving the way so that they're not always left alone. Like you were saying at the beginning, maybe it can be a solitary job. And we try to not do that and involve them in the process as much as we can. We sometimes also give them direct contact with our customers.
Okay.
We feel like they're part of our community, and if we talk to them and if we explain to them what we want them to become, how they want them to grow with us, we just trust them. And yeah.
Okay, so you're freelance. You try to build up a close freelance team, people who want to take repeat work with you and who are happy to learn how to do things the way that the Creative
Yeah,
Words way, the way that you want it done.
exactly. Yeah, that's the idea.
This is a little off topic, but something you said caught my attention.
Hmm.
Post editing, which of course is a growing service across the world, across the board. In terms of translators who are listening, who are just getting into post editing, they're a bit unsure about it. Do you provide? Should they expect some kind of guide or something like that from the agency or the language services company to help them?
Well, yes and no, because my idea would be, first of all, to start training yourselves, So since like you were saying, it's a growing service, everybody asks for post editing. If I was a translator starting out now, I would look into that myself. I would take some training course for sure. At the same time, I believe the agency should be giving out guidelines as to what they want post-editing to be, because there are different kinds of post-editing. It can be a light post-editing, a full post-editing. So there are differences. And it's best if you get those guidelines straight from your different clients. For example, yes, we do provide them with sort of trainings specific to the way we do post-editing, which is a full post-editing. So yeah, I would say ideally train yourself, but the agency ideally should be able to provide you with some training as well. If not, it's always best to provide that for yourself.
Yes, I would say for me, it is a doubt I sometimes have, because obviously they're asking for lower prices for post editing,
Yeah.
and there are different ways to post edit. You can do it, you can say this is good enough, we'll let it go through, or you can say no, we're trying to make this look like a human translation, which of course takes a lot longer. And it's certainly something that I've encountered where sort of having this dialogue to try to come to a price. It isn't necessarily that clear cut, I find.
Yeah, it's not so easy. It's always important to set, like you were saying, the expectations right from the beginning, from the client. What do you want out of this? What I think it's important also for freelancer is to show themselves even to an agency that they know what they're talking about. Like you were just saying, what do you want? Do you want just me to correct a few things? Do you want it human-like? Is it something that goes on a website, but with a consumption that's really fast, like a review of some customers on a website? Because in that case, maybe you don't really want a full post-editing human quality. If you provide that sort of guidance as a freelancer, even the project manager on the agency side might say, oh, look, they know what they're talking about. So, I mean, you become more of a partner. And it's what we always appreciate when freelancers really want to pick up and say, okay, I'm the expert here. I am telling you this is the way, and probably post editing at this level wouldn't work well. Maybe we should go for full post editing, but of course, it entails a different timing, price, productivity, and all sorts of things.
It's really interesting to hear your side of, to just have a dialogue about it. And I think another thing I'd add on to the end of that, again, coming back to the freelancer perspective, is that if the agency reacts in the way that you're talking about, the freelancer knows they're working with a good agency. If the project manager comes back kind of, I don't know, or you tell me, or, just with a bit of an attitude, it's perhaps a sign that you're not working with one of the best agencies.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. That's a good sign.
If translators are watching this interview and they're wondering, how can I diversify my services, or what can I do on my CV or, CPD to make myself more attractive to a company like yours that specializes in localization and content management, what sort of things would you advise them to do?
Well, first of all, create your profile also on social media. That's what people, well, not just creative words, but that's what everybody does. As soon as somebody applies for a position or a freelance position, we look for them on LinkedIn, first of all, and we see how active they are, what their, thoughts are about some subjects. The more you create your profile and your network, the better for sure. So I would probably invest a lot of time into that every day, so that you build your image, you build your brand, because that's what you are essentially as a freelancer. You are your own company. And the more you sell it well, the more you speak about yourself, the better, because people want to buy from people. And it's the same for companies like Creative Words. Our clients want to buy from us because maybe they have come to talk to us, they have come to know us at conferences or in calls. And you need to show yourself. You need to show yourself for what you love, for what you're passionate about. So even finding your niche, you shouldn't be just translating legal documents because there is a good market for that. Ideally, if you like legal translations, it's better because it shows. If you talk about that, if you present that in your profile, it will show and it will give a sense of, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. So let's have a talk with this person.
Okay, so like a level of participation within the specialization that goes that's showing a genuine interest in it, or a level of involvement beyond just sort of writing it on your profile and leaving it at that.
Exactly, yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't know what you were going to say, but I wasn't expecting that answer. It's really interesting to me that that's the first place you go is LinkedIn. And so would you, if someone is thinking, should I do a personal website or shall I focus on a LinkedIn profile? Which would you tell them to focus on?
Well, ideally both. I mean, I'm not a vendor manager myself, so that's what I would usually do. But if you ask our vendor manager, probably she would say, no, I would focus on the CV first. And then if there are some portfolios on their website, it's better than LinkedIn. I don't know. Maybe she would look at everything. Personally, I would look into LinkedIn because I think that networking is key in general for freelancers, companies, clients, anyone in this business or any business, to be honest. But even the website is a nice place to showcase your work, to tell more about yourself, even though I think it's coming more down to what you write about every day. So social media can help you in that regard, while the website can be more static. But of course, the website is important if you want to sell your services because of SEO. You need to be able to be found by someone who's looking for a freelance translator out there. So the website is, of course, absolutely important. But between vendor managers in other companies, I've come to understand that they do look for freelancers, especially on LinkedIn. So having the LinkedIn profile up to date with, I don't know, all the certifications of all the courses that you've completed would be definitely a plus for sure.
I think that's a great piece of advice. And it also helps people focus, because the other thing about social media is you sort of think, oh, do I need to be everywhere? I don't know what to do. I don't even like it. It's kind of stressful. So focusing just there on LinkedIn, well, at least you just do it there and then it's a good start. I think another thing that occurred to me just listening to what you were saying is this concept of real estate. Your website is your real estate. LinkedIn is somebody else's real estate. And if you did get hacked, or if something went wrong and you got banned, which I do know people who this has happened to, you'll lose it. And so I would say have both of them, because then you've got a bit of backup there.
Totally. Yeah. Both.
Another really interesting point about creative words is that you, or as I understand from, I think, watching you talk in another interview, that as when Creative Words was looking as a way to stand out, you decided that you would just specialize in the Italian language. And that's quite unusual and it's quite bold. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the thinking behind that decision, and also how it might apply to freelance translators who are thinking about specialization.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good question. So, first of all, how it started. We wanted to sell Italian at first. So, we really focused on building an in-house team. Mm-hmm. First of all, they were translators. Now they've become to be lead linguists. Then, of course, there was the pandemic. So we were all a bit unsure. So we were taking everything that would come our way just because you never know what's going to happen. So we started working into other languages and becoming more of an MLV, so a multi-language vendor. Mm-hmm. But we didn't have a vendor manager yet. So I would be the vendor manager looking for people. And we soon failed to, be up to standards because we were not ready to offer those languages, those new services. And so we looked back at us and we said, okay, what do we do best? Italian. Well, into Italian for sure, because we have the team, we know the language, we are in Italy, we know how to, when we have to talk to our clients, we know, and they want to come to Italy, we know how to what advice to give them, because we're here, we know. So let's focus on that. And it became like the main goal. But of course, we do not just translate into Italian. We will never become an MLV. We will never translate, 40 languages every day for every project, for sure. But we do offer also, for some clients, some other languages as well, which are not linked to Italian. Mm-hmm. But if we can focus into Italian or from Italian into other languages, so to encourage our customers on how to build their presence elsewhere, that's where we work best. So why not doing that? Which links to what I was saying before about freelancing. If you're passionate about something, if you're good at something, that's your niche. So that's what makes you stand out. That's what makes you become better every day at what you do. So why would you pick something else or be good at, be an average good at, 10 different topics if you can be good at 3, 2, 1. So that's kind of the idea of why we chose to present ourselves as the Italian vendor.
It sounds so simple when you say it. I wrote down, the simple question: what do we do best?
Yeah.
But actually, to get to that point is really difficult, because I think that there's this natural battle against, well, I do lots of things well, and what do I want to do, and what do I think I can do?
True.
And so to actually simplify it down to that is a long process, and one that is extremely useful. Yeah, what does this look like? If it's simple, what am I best at? And there's your answer.
Yeah, it takes time. You need to fail also a little.
Yeah, I guess you do. Yeah, and maybe understand yourself as well. I'm thinking for a freelancer, what is it that I want? I might want to be the best legal translator, but actually I find legal kind of boring. And it's like, well, in that case, probably not the best option. What about, so say a freelancer is also sort of mapping this on, and they're thinking about, well, what about languages? Should I just specialize in one source language, or is it a good idea to offer several source languages?
Well, I guess it really depends on how much you have experience into translating from different languages rather than just one. Mm-hmm. Because if you are naturally able and have been translating from, I would say 2 at least, no more than 2 probably, source languages, why not? Mm-hmm. If you have for, 5 years just translated, let's say, in my case, English into Italian, and you studied French as well, but you've never actually translated from French for 5 years, maybe it's not a good idea to sell your services straight away, at least. But maybe if you want to bring that up again, maybe brush up the French again, or do some voluntary jobs, train yourself a little before you can translate from that language too. But yeah, it really depends on the level of knowledge of the source languages.
I think there is a definite, when people go into lots and lots of source languages, particularly, certain languages are very similar.
Yeah.
But particularly if it's very different languages, there is also the issue of believability. I would say that you want the qualifications to back up the claim on your CV.
Yeah, exactly. If you, like I was saying, if you do translate regularly from different source languages, why not keep doing that? But if you don't, well, I don't think there is, like you were saying, reliability in what you state on your CV. You translate from 5 different source languages, but do you really translate from all those 5 source languages every day or every month, at least, a certain amount of words? That's the question you should be asking before you put that on your CV. And in any case, translation agencies are likely to be asking for a test translation. It will show if you do not know how to translate from all those source languages. So the more you can focus on something, the better, I would say. But at the same time, you do not want to just do one thing. You need to also sort of slightly diversify your services and offering. Otherwise, like we've noticed with the pandemic, if you were just a translator in the tourism business, maybe you had some troubles, maybe, I don't know. But if you were a medical translator, your business might have gone really, really well in 2020 and 2021 at least.
Mm-hmm.
So diversify a little for sure, but
Yeah,
not
I
too
think
much.
that's great advice. Also, with just the way everything is changing so quickly, with technology being open to being able to jump between these different services is a good backup
Yeah.
option. Looking at your LinkedIn profile before we spoke, I also saw that you're a Lock Lunch ambassador. Now,
Yes.
Lock Lunch is something that I have seen for years. I've seen it in lots of different places, and I always sort of go, what is that? And so I thought, great, I can finally get an answer to this question. So, what's Lock Lunch?
Okay, LocLunch is a volunteer organization that was born, I think, in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Mhm.
And essentially, it's just an informal gathering for lunch among people who are passionate about localization. It can be a translator, a company, a client, a marketing manager, anyone who wants to talk about internationalization, localization, anything related to our world. And it usually happens at lunch, which is why it's called Lock Lunch. And anyone can become an ambassador for the cities they're living in. Of course, if you look for ambassadors in a city where there is already an ambassador, you might not be able to become another ambassador, of course. But anyone can become one, honestly, and anyone can join any Lock Lunch. If you happen to be in London while there is the Lock Lunch happening, you just join in, and it's not something that's paid by the ambassador. Everybody pays for their own lunch.
Yeah.
It's just an excuse to get together and network with people, meet new people. It's not a sales environment. You don't go there just to showcase your services and sell them to somebody. Again, you buy from people. So you just build relationships, which is always good. And eventually it might turn out that, I don't know, 6 years from now or a year later, you will have a customer that you once met at a Lock Lunch. But that's not the aim. The aim is to grow together, to speak together, to get new ideas, and yeah, to grow, to network. So yeah,
So, if people are listening to this and they want to find out more, where should we send them?
there is a website. It's called loclunch.net, and if you go there, you can see the cities in which LocLunch is happening, the list of ambassadors, the list of the next LocLunches. So if you happen to be somewhere else, you can look for those,
Okay.
and you can apply to become an ambassador. Anything. It's all a volunteer thing.
Okay, great. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for anyone who's interested.
Good. Thank you.
And another organization I can see you're also involved in is called Women in Localization.
Yes.
What does that group do?
Well, while LocLunch is more of an informal organization, Women in Localization is a highly formalized not-for-profit organization
Uh-huh.
on a worldwide scale. It was born 15 years ago in the Bay Area. The idea and the mission, which still is in place, is to foster the advancement of women in and the localization industry. Basically, despite the localization business being a very female oriented place, we all know that, it's still difficult for women all around the world to speak up, to become, I don't know, CEOs of companies, to ask for raise within companies, to grow. So that's why it was born back in the Bay Area 15 years ago. From that moment on, it became a not for profit, and it became also local, not just global. So there is the global organization, of course, but there are some local chapters. They're called chapters, and they are for countries, for different countries or different areas in geographical areas. And what they do is to bring women in localization to the local places. So they host events, well, on site, hopefully. With the pandemic, everything went online for a while, just like the Lock Lunches, by the way. They became Lock Lunches over,
Over
Zoom.
Zoom. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
eating and drinking over Zoom. Weird. And so were the events for women in localization. And events usually are about empowering women, teaching something about leadership, about something related to localization. It can be a machine translation panel discussion, anything to help the community of women in localization grow. Anyone can become a member. It's not just for women. Men are always welcome, even within the organization, of course, and as members. And there are also a lot of good volunteering opportunities in women in localization. So if somebody wants to be involved more, they can become members first, and then they would have access to the volunteer openings. And again, it's always that you get to know people, you grow by learning from others. There is also a mentorship program within women in localization. So especially for younger people, if they want to learn from somebody who's been there already, they can be paired up with a mentor. And I think it's good. I think it's always a good way to learn and grow and become better in our career.
To finish this interview, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everybody I interview, and that is, what would be your message for early career translators?
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind would be don't be afraid, because it can be daunting at first. Don't be afraid to do what you're passionate about and keep learning, like I've been saying the whole time. Keep learning. Don't be afraid of new technologies coming your way. Actually learn those new technologies. Be on top of things as much as you can. The good thing about the newest generations is that I think they are the future and they can shape the future of communication, basically, thanks to the new technologies or not, or thanks to the new ideas that they bring on. So keep learning, keep growing, network a lot, build your own profile, your niche, find your niche, and don't be afraid.
I think that's wonderful advice. Yeah, embracing the technology and the networking. It's something that I didn't understand well enough when I was younger, and I came to understand as I grew in my career just how important that is.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us and for sharing so much information with us, Dana. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation and in preparing translators for certification through the Diptrans exam. If you like our content, please let us know by clicking on the subscribe button. See you in the next video.